Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chasing a Murder. I hope you guys are doing awesome. But guys, there are so many cases out there right now, like the Anna Walshe case and the four Idaho students, that are just making you rethink who humanity is becoming. It's just crazy stories. And one of the commenters on this channel said, "What's up with the name Brian?" Seems that Brian carries some kind of evil with it because both cases, in Anna Walshe case, her husband's name's Brian. And then you had the four Idaho students who they believe the suspect involved with those killings is also Brian. You know, the coincidence is strange, but it's just plain evil. These guys are just simply evil deep in their core. And I've got an update, and I'm sure a lot of you probably seen it. Maybe some of you haven't. I'm very, very late on getting it up, actually. So, Anna is still missing. No one has found her. At least we don't know. Have the police found something, some sort of sign as to where she might be? Well, hopefully so. Probably so, since they did make an arrest and change and upgrade the charges for Brian Walshe, now having to defend himself from murder, versus the first charge, which was his intent was to mislead police. So what we're hearing is several of the friends that knew this couple, well, they're shocked to know that Brian was capable of such things. But as he was in the courtroom, the prosecutor named off a timeline and a list of things that they were able to dig up, including Google searches, GPS information, along with, good Lord, guys, this is so much evidence against this guy, surveillance videos. But after watching this court hearing, it seems that possibly this wasn't premeditated, simply based off his Google searches that he did on his son's iPad, by the way. Remember, the oldest kids in that household, well, 6 years old. There's three of them. So they're just toddlers, very young babies. It would be nearly impossible to avoid the kids seeing something in this situation that he's accused of doing. So let's jump into what the prosecutor had to say. And it was a long list of evidence against this guy. And here's the thing. He's standing in there, not afraid to look at that prosecutor, trying to look her in the eyes, it appeared. But the prosecutor, she was busy reading this long list of evidence that they had against him. Also, maybe, I was wondering, does she feel uncomfortable? Because this guy is so narcissistic. He really is, and very blatant and very cocky. And while in that courtroom, you could see him shake his head as she read that list to various accusations and, attaching him to these searches. So this is what bothers me most. I think most of us realize that Anna most likely isn't here on this earth any longer. And God hope that we're wrong, but considering the evidence that we heard yesterday, it just really sealed it for me. Anna, who loved and cherished her husband more than anything, her family, was deceived by the very man she loved in the worst possible way that someone you love can deceive you. So let's go over the timeline. We learned that Anna had made plans to meet a friend and her mother at her newly purchased townhome in DC where she worked, rescheduled for January the 5th. On December 31st, Anna and her husband Brian make plans with a friend by the name of Jim to celebrate the New Year's. So remember, Anna's in her late 30s and Brian's in his late 40s. According to the prosecutor, it's around December 31st of 2022 that Anna's phone is at the home. They pick up her phone's ping in her house from December 31st to around January 2nd. Now I have a rough timeline put up for you. So one thing police said is they determined that Anna's phone never left the house during the holiday. So this guy named Jim comes over to their house. He says that he celebrates, nothing seems off, and that he leaves their house around 1 to 1:30 a.m. that morning. So basically it's January 1st. We learned that Brian told police that Anna had planned to go to work early and just a few hours from that 1:30 door that the friend says he exits their house. Anna did have to return to work. We know this because she had set up a flight out of Logan for January 3rd, but not January 1st. Brian will claim that she takes a Lyft or an Uber and leaves the house to go catch this flight that's for days later. At one point, he says that he's sleeping by the time Anna left. But the truth is, on January 1st at 4:55 a.m., he's on his son's iPad searching for how long before a body starts to smell. Around 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. And there's a point where he's kind of quiet on the internet, and it's approximately an hour later, around 5:47 a.m., he actually searched the internet 10 ways to dispose of a body. And the most alarming Google yet, I think, is it basically set his motive. It's around 6:25 a.m., and he asked Google how long for someone to be missing to inherit. So, basing off of what we know about his timeline by the stamps he's left through the Google search, it appears that Anna probably was, her life was taken sometime in between 1:30 and 4:30 that morning. His Google search also gives you an idea of his thought process during this time. His concerns are not the fact that his wife is lying there dead, but how to cover his own tracks and protect himself while inheriting everything she's worked hard for her entire life. By 6:34 a.m., it appears that he figured out which way he wants to dispose of his wife, allegedly, and he Googles how, I'm sorry guys, I'm losing my spot here, how to throw away body parts. Now, there's a big pause in between this last search and the next search, which is done a few hours later. He searched 9:29 a.m. What does formaldehyde do? 9:59 a.m. Can identification be made on partial remains? So it seems he's going with the fact that he's going to dismember his wife based off the searches. You got to remember, Anna's 3 children are in the house at this time. Let me jump back a little bit here because I forgot to mention the fact that right before he asked about the partial remains, it's at 9:34 that he asked, how long does DNA last? About an hour and a half later, around 11:35 a.m., he's searching on his son's iPad again, the best ways to dispose of a body, referring to dismemberment, and by 11:44 a.m., how to clean blood off the floor. So you got to think this guy is doing things as he's going along. So obviously, around 11:44 that there must be blood and DNA that he's concerned about. Even more concerning, another hour and few go by. It's around 1:08 p.m. and he searches. How do you detect blood? What happens when you put body parts in ammonia? And it's less than 3 minutes later, around 1:10 p.m., he asks, can you be charged with murder without a body? So here's something interesting. It might give you a look into something else he might have done, and that is dealing with fire around 1:21, he asked, "Is it better to throw away kerosene clothes or wash them?" Guys, it can't get any sicker than this, and I really can't. Usually I try to cover up the stories simply because I work so hard. I try to monetize these videos because I go through mics like crazy, and they're like $40 a pop. But this video, I could not do that. So let's go to the next day. It's January 2nd, and we're learning that he purchased 3 rugs at Home Goods. Now, remember, we just heard that police were searching landfills and dumpsters and all these things, and they uncovered carpet soaked in blood. But it's around January 2nd, midday, that it appears that he's ready to really get things rolling and ready to start his dirty deeds. At 12:45 p.m. that day, he asked Google, "Hacksaw best to dismember." And by 1:10 p.m. January 2nd, he asked, "Can you be charged with murder without a body?" But it's the next question that really can really sink in deep into your soul and heart. Can you identify a body with broken teeth? How could you even type that? How could you even think like that? This is his wife, the mother of his children. This is pretty dark stuff, probably some of the most dark that I've heard since Kelsey Berreth. So, since 3:14 a.m., January 2nd, Anna's phone's been shut off. Later on that afternoon, around 5:32 p.m., he is seen removing gloves at, well, it's near Derby Street. January 3rd, GPS has actually tracked him to an apartment complex on Abington, where they say he stops near a dumpster, throws a bag into it. It appears to be heavy. And what we're learning is possibly they have surveillance video showing him doing these things. Um, it's shortly after he leaves that dumpster that he heads to another apartment complex in Brockton. They see him throwing items into that dumpster as well. And so by 1:02 p.m., he's Googling again. And it can't get any worse each time he Googles. He types, "What happens to hair on a dead body?" He must be finding these answers quickly because minutes later, 1:13 p.m., what is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on a surface in the woods? Again, minutes later, 1:20 p.m., will baking soda make a body smell good? In between this, we don't know the exact time, Brian is reaching out to a few friends and co-workers, suggesting that he has no idea where his wife is and that this is a little bit concerning. Have you seen her? But it was her work employers that actually made the phone call to police with concerns about Anda's whereabouts and her well-being. He asked them to actually do a wellness check on Anna, saying that she was last seen on December 30th. That's according to police documents. Now, there's something also shared here. I'm not certain what this is attached to, but it says in one log, the security office knows nothing about the female, no reason to think that she is in danger or ill, and that the company had contacted Anna's husband. They find out that Brian had not reported his wife missing in those several days of not seeing her. And what we learn later is police discover a surveillance video at Home Depot of Brian shopping for various items that were very questionable, including trash bags, a hatchet, different types of tapes, a suit, and booties. Sometime on January 2nd, in between all of those searches and traveling. Remember, he's on house arrest. And here he is, January 4th. He's shopping again, and at 4:15 p.m., he goes to Lowe's and gets squeegees and a trash can. After employees call in the wellness check, police show up to the Walshe's house in Massachusetts, where they say they find the Volvo there with the seats down and the seats wrapped in a plastic liner. He tells police the story on how his wife had to leave for an emergency dealing with a property. It was around 6 a.m. and she took a lift. Police will do some checks on this to see if that is correct or consistent. Find out that there's no evidence of Anna even leaving the house, much less taking a Lyft or Uber. Police have responded to the Walsh's house around 6:35 p.m. January 4th, and we're not really certain if it's at that moment that Brian reported his wife missing, but until then he hadn't. It appeared that the police investigators might have called him on the end process of whatever happened to his wife Anna. Thankfully, investigators started searching immediately around Chief Justice Cushing Highway for any evidence in connection to the case. And what was really weird was Friday, January 6th of 2023, firefighters were called out to a former home at 725 Jerusalem Road that belonged to Anna and her husband, well, their family. It appeared that the home caught fire and was burning down. Investigators said it was just a weird coincidence. But you have to wonder, is it really? We discovered through reporters that on January 8th, there's a woman that appeared to be Anna's Walsh's mother-in-law, Brian's mother, who was spotted outside the home of the missing Massachusetts mother. And so you have to wonder, was she there to deal, to help with the children, to deal with the aftermath of what police were discovering? Her name is Diana Walsh, and she was wearing a gray coat, and she had driven in her red VW Bug. Searchers shift the search to the DC home, which is a townhome she just purchased recently, only to discover Anna was nowhere in sight. After seeing Brian's mother at the house, it shortly after that Brian Walsh, 46, of Cosset, was arrested and charged with misleading investigators. After his second court hearing, he's now had his charges upgraded. And let's watch a few clips of the prosecutor sharing what they discover. Now, based off of what we believe and suspect, he had something to do with his wife's disappearance, and how that was done was very dark and evil if you look at his Google search. But pay attention to his face, the lack of remorse, the lack of any interest of his wife's well-being since the beginning of this case is just unfathomable. And my heart can't help but ask, how can one be so cold? And we're seeing more and more people like this. And we've already been told that this guy was labeled in some way a sociopath. But I believe that it's most likely a psychopath, which we think that investigators and police will probably look more into that.
January 1st, defendant Googled using his son's iPad. Some of the searches are as follows. Keep in mind that the defendant said he left at 6 a.m. At 4:55 a.m. on January 1st, he searched how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to unbound a body. At 5:40,
that denial, that narcissism, he's shaking his head like that's not true. Is he going to blame that on his son? Let's continue. I did that at the beginning, went over all this so that she could understand. She's got a strong accent.
7 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. At 6:25 a.m. on the 1st, how long for someone to be missing to inherit?
How long does someone have to be missing before you can inherit? That was probably the icing on the cake. And not only the icing on the cake, but the lock of his cell door. He reminds me a lot of Lori, where he's supposed to be this really bad person, but he's not good at it. He can't lie very well. He's not very creative. So he has to work around what he really did and make excuses as to why he went where he went, as well as why he did what he did and why was he lying to police. In 2016, a friend describes that Brian was taken off his father's will. A friend vouched that his father didn't take too kindly to Brian. This is because Brian was stealing money from him, allegedly anyhow. And a friend said that Brian often referred to his father as daddy, even well into his 30s. He found that odd. Brian and his families tried very much to get his father to come live with him, but he refused. So Brian tried to do it through a legal process, which failed. A work buddy of Brian's father says that Brian is a very evil individual. And you're having contradictions of who Brian is, but ultimately, we know that he's on house arrest. His father says that he stole money from him. But I threw this up for you guys to read over, and we'll go over it quickly. Is a friend of Brian said he called him daddy, as we mentioned, well into his 30s, which he found that slightly odd. He says the two always got along well, but according to his dad's friend, his dad tried to avoid talking to his son simply because he felt like he was always trying to manipulate him. He also mentioned the fact that he never saw anything to make him think that Brian was a violent person. I never saw him raise his voice to his father, never saw them argue. But another friend says, he got to see this very nasty streak that emerged. So who knows, who Brian seems to be whoever people want him to be. Watching his demeanor in court is enough for me to understand he really could care less what anyone thinks. Nothing means anything to him. That's my opinion based off of this ridiculous amount of evidence coming out against him. And never have I ever done a case where you can almost think, or without a doubt, that he is responsible for his wife being missing. Just all of that evidence is so overwhelming. This is going to be a slam dunk for the prosecution. And the only way that he could get off from this is if the state makes some kind of mistake, or when they arrested him, they made a mistake. But guys, please share below what you think. So I found something I thought you guys would find very interesting. So let's talk about Brian's defense attorney, Tracy Minor. She said in a statement Wednesday that she couldn't really comment on the evidence and suggested prosecutors' case against her client appears weak. Something defense attorneys like to say to make their clients look better. She claims that the prosecutor hadn't even sent a lot of that evidence to her yet. She said, quote, "My experience, whereas here, the prosecutor leaks so-called evidence to the press before they provide it to me, their case isn't that strong. When they have a strong case referring to prosecutors, they give me everything as soon as possible. We shall see what they have and what evidence is admissible in court, where the case will ultimately be decided," end quote. Well, considering, let's go over a few things that they did find, and they are finding some DNA evidence. A lot of people are worried that some of, the most important evidence might have been incinerated. So investigators were able to find bags, supposedly, allegedly, that Brian dumped off at various areas. They found Anna Walshe's COVID-19 vaccination card, her product purse she carried, and even more concerning, part of her necklace, which is consistent with one of the necklaces that she is seen wearing in a few of her photos. Now, the state crime lab has tested some of these bloody items that they located in these bags that I'm sure that they're comparing to video surveillance the best they can, most likely trying to look for fingerprints. They can't locate the fingerprints, then something else to link those bags to Brian. They found a pair of slippers that had both Anna and Brian Walsh's DNA on them. They also found Anna's DNA on some tissues. And let's not forget what they found prior to this. They found blood in the basement of the couple's home. They found a knife with DNA, which we've not been told whose DNA they found on that knife. And let's not forget that the knife was damaged. I don't even want to think about how that come about. The evidence is weak? I don't think so. We can refer back to Kelsey Berreth, who had less evidence than they did. Well, as far as, you've got to go back to the Kelsey Berreth case to compare this, because they never, and still to this day, have found Kelsey Berreth's remains. If you're not familiar with that story, check it out. I've covered that story. But basically, Kelsey Berreth had a fiance. He killed her, and a witness said they witnessed him burn the body. So if it was burnt as bad as this witness said it was going to be hard if they did find anything to probably pull DNA from there. Let's just say he was prosecuted very well without her remains. And let's not forget, they're not done or finished searching, and not through testing. And based off of what they have this early, I say this case is looking really good for the prosecutor. Share what you think about this case below. Do you think this case is weak or strong for the prosecutor? Don't forget, guys, Jasmine Robinson went missing in Archer, Florida. She was 7 months pregnant, and still the family hasn't found any answers. Please share her face and share her story today. If you like my work, you can donate to my Patreon. And if you enjoy these videos I work very hard to put together, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you so much for caring. Thank you for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.